from Central Virginia. Today is the 4th of July and I am going to step outside of the celebration and do a little bit of mulching. Yesterday in my video I talked a little bit about mulching and why I think it's so important when I was mulching my eggplants. But today I actually want to do some mulching, and before I head down to the garden to do that, I wanted to show you a couple of examples of why mulching works in terms of really reducing the weed pressure. In the summertime I tend to use hay, and I actually will create new beds in the fall just by layering hay. In the fall, I will use crushed leaves as a mulch material, or some combination of leaves and hay, just depending on what I have on hand. If I can't get my hands on hay, I'll use straw, but I do prefer hay. Now I know there is a big controversy and people have strong opinions about using hay versus using straw or using none of the above. I use both hay and straw. I also use leaves, as I've mentioned, but I prefer to use hay. Here's the caveat, however. The hay I use, I know exactly where it comes from. Thanks, Dave. And it's grown with no chemicals or spray or pesticides of any sort ever. So I can be sure that this hay is very clean in terms of anything that's been treated. And it's grown with no chemicals or spray or pesticides of any sort ever. So I can be sure that this hay is very clean in terms of anything that's been treated with. And if you don't have a source like that, I would be somewhat reticent to use that hay or straw, particularly if it's from a large commercial grower. And so I always, though, know my source and I ask a lot of questions. So why is the use of hay controversial? People say if you use hay, you'll get a lot of grass and weed seed. And I will tell you, I have had grass and weed sprout from both hay and straw. Straw technically is a different product, but oftentimes I'll show you that you can see seed heads mixed in with straw sometimes. Here's some hay that's being stored. You can see that there are a lot of seed heads in here, and those are perfectly capable of sprouting. Most of the seed is out of there, but there can be some, and that is why sometimes you can get straw sprouting just as much as you can get hay sprouting. However, in either case, I have found that if you thickly mulch your plant beds, you can easily, any hay or straw seed that's going to pop and sprout is going to be on the surface, and you can easily pick those out. If you have a bale of hay sitting around and it starts to sprout, you just flip it over. I don't normally take you to my flower gardens out in the front yard. I'm not a flower grower. I'm more of a vegetable grower, but I do love flowers. But I am going to show you what happens when you don't mulch in terms of weed pressure, and also the level of moisture in the ground. This particular bed is a flower bed that I have in my front yard. It's a full sun, generally speaking, except in the early morning when the shade of the ancient Osage orange tree shades this. But clearly it's now about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and the sun is brightly shining on this garden bed. Now, let's move down to the bed itself. I will tell you that I spend way more time pulling weeds and grass out of this bed than I do my garden vegetable beds that are mulched with hay and straw. And also the soil just dries out much faster. We've had a lot of rain. The soil is still relatively moist, but I will tell you that this soil is hot on top. When I go down to my other garden and you see the soil underneath the hay, you'll see that it's super, super cool, much cooler and more moist. Here's crabgrass coming in, more crabgrass, and I come out here and pull this kind of crabgrass, so a couple times a week. So it's really incessant. And here's another example of another flower bed in my front yard that is definitely full of weeds and crabgrass, quite pernicious stuff. I want to show you now the kind of weed pressure that I get in my vegetable garden versus my flower gardens. My vegetable gardens are all heavily mulched. As I mentioned, I rarely have to do weeding. in these. So I actually had to look around for a weed, and I found one. All right, this is a weed. It's not a terrible weed, and probably it actually did sprout from the hay. This is a bit of vetch that has sprouted, and I'm just going to pull it just like that. All right, here's another example of some weeds. However, you will notice that this is actually under the wood chip, and it is crabgrass, and I'm going to pull it. I promise you, I check my garden every day. If I see a weed, I do pull it. But if I pull 5 weeds a day from this entire garden, that's a lot. No kidding. Okay, so I'm going to take you to a place where I'm likely to see some weeds. Down here. Oh, look. These are the Trumbicino zucchinis that I planted a couple days ago. All right, here we go. You can see I don't have a lot of hay mulch here. This is one of the places I want to get to today. All right, you are seeing weeds pop up in the bare earth. What does this have in common with my flower garden? It's not mulched, right? And we're getting some weeds there. This is my task number 1, is to get this heavily mulched down, especially now that my Trumbicino squash plants have sprouted. I'll do videos on Trumbicino because it's so much fun. Here's another weed. Is that some grass there? Yes. There we go. All right, let's see if we get any other weeds in here. Yep, here's some. More weeds than I like. More weeds than I have to deal with. So this is why I want to get this mulched very, very quickly. By contrast, I look through the other side that has been mulched, and there's not a single weed in there. Another point of comparison was to check the soil temperature. I don't have my thermometer here, but I just want to take a look, and I'll tell you what the soil temperature feels like in the mulched section. Now this is been getting the afternoon sun all day. All right, here's my Eden Gem melons. All right, I'm going to part the mulch. And already we're looking at the color of the earth here. Notice the deep richness. Oh man, it's just moist and lovely. It's cool. It's literally, it's got to be a good 10 degrees cooler than the soil on the other side. Again, this has been in bright sun all day. Here is another example of unmulched versus mulched. These are lima beans that I planted. I'm seeing a couple of little weeds begin to pop up. There's a few right here. I'll just pull those surface weeds out. All right, now what I'm going to be doing is coming along and putting hay all along these. So now I just need to put my trusty gloves on and get going on this mulching, because it needs to happen. It needed to happen a couple days ago. So I'm just going to take this big old clump of hay. Now I'm not one bit worried that this is starting to rot. That's exactly what I want to happen. I want this to rot down, mulch down, feed those soil organisms, and provide lots and lots of nutrition for my soil organisms. I'm building soil here as well as helping my plants keep cool in the hot summertime and retain water. Even in this later afternoon time with some shade, it's still kind of warm out here. But I want to take you in and I want to show you how I mulch those spaces with the beans and with the Trumbicino squash, so you can see the difference and about the layer, the thickness that I want, at least initially. I will continue to add mulch into these beds as these plants grow. All right, so here is the bed with the Trumbicino squash in it. And you can see this mulch here is about, finger height right now. I will be adding and pulling some more. Actually, I'll do that right now, pull some more in. No bare soil is the rule. Here's the lima bean bed here. Again, I did the same thing. I just went down between the rows and put a nice layer of the mulch in. As these plants grow, I'll add some more in between the plants. And then, the plant canopy will end up shading the soil from that point on. I am seriously not going to be an evangelist for for hay, saying it is the only way, because it's really not the only way. I think the key thing in my experience as a gardener is to mulch, 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 baby. That is one of the keys to that I think has been a key to my success in the vegetable gardens that I've had. So I'll show you a couple of things. My vegetable gardens tend to be super productive, and I honestly, I have to say that I spend far more time pulling weeds from those two little unmulched flower beds than I do from my entire vegetable garden. Seriously. All of my beds, external and internal, inside the garden, have been mulched down with hay or straw. This is the newest bed that I created, and this is where I've got some pumpkins growing now, as well as some perennial and annual flowers. And a tomato plant. This is the purple bumblebee. Now here is an example. This was my Ruth Stout potato bed. I did several videos on how I created that, and then how I'm maintaining it. This was just created. There were 4 bales of hay that were stored here over the winter. It began to mulch down. I planted the potatoes on the ground, mulched a little bit more, and harvested them about a week ago, I guess, or a week and a half. Now I have put some pumpkin plants in here. This is a Seminole pumpkin, and this one is a Cinderella pumpkin, and they seem to be doing just fine. This is a thick mulch of hay, as well as straw. Remember I said I use both. This had been hay. In the spring, when I went to mulch again, my hay had not come in yet, and so I just added some straw on top because that's what I had on hand. So that's an example of how I use both. This is hay. This is straw. Straw, hay. It's a totally different product. The straw is a byproduct and does not have the seed head on it, and doesn't. It's not meant for nutritional value for animals. It is meant for bedding. Hay is meant to be consumed. It's nutrition, and so you're going to pass that nutrition on into your garden beds. When Dave brings me my hay, he's able to bring me 12 bales at a time, and so I've been going through them. I've still got several left, but I'm going to be going through those today as I put more mulch down. Now you might say, well, yeah, but what about grass creeping in, and what about all of that in a no dig bed? You don't have a problem with, you're surely going to get that kind of problem coming in. And look behind me. This is the field on which all of this was built. And this is just various kinds of grasses, some nice grasses and rye, and some is just crabgrass, weeds, and everything else. This is my sweet potato pen that I built this year. And this is just literally the back strip back there was next to the interior fence, was just bales of hay that I had stacked up back there during last growing season and through the winter. I only had enough to really put down one layer into this bigger expanded space. The rest of this space was just wood chipped over, and I added some compost in that part and then hay on top of it. So this is, you can see that the sweet potatoes are thriving. The holes that you see were from the hail damage that we had last month. I wanted to get in the shade and talk a little bit about how I did these border beds using the hay bales. Where I had planted those beautiful the peppers and the watermelons and the butternut squashes and the black-eyed Susans that you see on the southern border, as well as half of this border coming up to about right here on this northern fence. The way I dealt with that, this wasn't constructed all at once. It was this whole garden I have been working on since 2020 was the first year. Really expanded it in 2021 and 2022. And this year also I did a lot of the outside work. The borders, however, I made over the course. The external borders I made in 2021 because when I first started this garden and had a fence right at the edge, I found that it was so hard to keep the weeds and the grass, this grass that you see growing here, from invading into my my garden space. So the solution that I came up with, well, some of it was just happenstance. I got a delivery of hay, and I wasn't ready to use it yet because my garden was going and I had plenty of mulch down. But I knew I would want to be using it in the next year. And so I just took the bales of hay and I lined them up sort of like a train, one after the other, right up against the fence. And so I had a boundary that was the width of a hay bale, and then, you know, like Lincoln logs lined up one by one by one. And then last year, when I went to plant, it was a bed. It was all ready. All I had to do was part the hay, dig down in, the mulch layer was already there. And that's what I did on much of this garden. It was really super effective, and things grow abundantly, as you can see, in these border zones. So that's just a little bit more on why I mulch heavily and how I mulch using hay. I'll continue to make videos about mulches. Again, I don't want to convince anybody that they've got to use hay or got to use straw. If it works, for me, it works, and it may well work for you. It might just be that I have magical source of hay. I think I do. But I've also, when I've gotten straw, I've gotten it from different places and different people. I always ask though. I'm going to go in and I think I'm going to sit under that big tree. I think I'm going to have myself a cold beverage and put my feet up on this 4th of July. Thanks for watching. Happy gardening. Bye. Just got a bug up my nose. That was not pleasant.